So I go to the other room, and I'm really kind of nervous about it because, like I said, it's the first time I wrote a melody. So I didn't know if it was good, although it sounded good in my ear.
Sorry.
Jennifer Lopez has been ruling the spotlight for over 30 years, and let's be real, few stars can match her level of fame. She's not just a singer, not just an actress, and definitely not just a fashion icon. She's been a full-blown global brand, the kind of celebrity who can grab headlines no matter what she does. But in 2024, she rolled the dice with a massive $20 million project that ended up blowing up in her face, and not in a good way. Her album, This Is Me, now was supposed to be her big, shiny comeback moment. Instead, the timing couldn't have been worse. Her highly publicized divorce overshadowed everything. Critics ripped the project apart, and fans barely paid attention. The record wasn't just ignored, it was practically buried alive. And the shocking part? It showed the world that even someone as powerful as Jennifer Lopez can't just buy her way into cultural relevance anymore. What was supposed to cement her legacy ended up going down as one of the coldest flops in her career.
This album was first announced on the 20th anniversary of her This Is Me Then album. She released multiple vinyls for it, made an appearance on SNL, and released a movie on Prime Video to go with the album. But despite all the promotion, this album didn't really do that well, peaking at only number 38 on the Billboard 200, which is the lowest out of any for albums. This album also had 2 singles, and neither of them charted on the Hot 100.
Now don't get it twisted, J.Lo didn't just pop up out of nowhere, she grinded her way to the top. She first caught eyes as one of the famous fly girl dancers on In Living Color. But the moment that truly made people sit up and notice was her breakout role playing the late Tejano superstar in the movie Selena back in 1997. That single role turned her from a dancer on TV into Hollywood's newest leading lady almost overnight. From there, Jennifer wasted no time. She built an empire by mixing her Puerto Rican roots with mainstream pop, giving the world hits like If You Had My Love and, of course, the anthem that defined an era, Jenny from the Block. Those songs weren't just music. They became cultural statements that stamped her as one of the defining stars of her generation. Back in the early 2000s, Jennifer Lopez wasn't just dropping tracks. She was rewriting the entire era. Every release was bigger than the last, with albums flying off shelves by the millions and records going quadruple platinum like it was nothing. Overnight, J.Lo went from a rising Latina star to the absolute center of the music industry spotlight, and everybody wanted a piece of her shine. Now jump to 2024. After decades in the game, Jennifer wasn't satisfied with just cranking out another album. She was ready to gamble on something wild, something that could either be legendary or a total train wreck. So she threw her heart, her energy, and a jaw-dropping chunk of her own fortune into a daring project she believed would redefine her legacy. That project, This Is Me Now. And the way she rolled it out was shocking. You've got to understand, Jennifer hadn't touched a studio in over 10 years, a whole decade gone. And then boom, she came back swinging with a massive all-in 3-part spectacle. Not just a studio album, but a polished, big-budget visual musical, packed with drama, glitz, and high emotion, plus a raw, behind-the-scenes documentary meant to pull fans straight into her world. For the diehards, it sounded like a dream come true. But here's the twist. Jennifer didn't run to record labels, streaming giants, or Hollywood moguls for help. Nope. She decided to bankroll the entire thing with her own money. We're talking millions on the line, all coming from her pockets. And why would she take such a risky bet? Because according to her, this wasn't just another project, it was her ultimate love letter. A love letter to her fans who rode with her from the very beginning, to the career that made her a global icon, and to her headline-grabbing rekindled romance with Ben Affleck that had the tabloids going crazy. Jennifer Lopez wanted the world to hear her truth, and only on her terms. That's why from the album to the cinematic love story film, every single piece of the project came straight out of her own pocket. And let's be clear, this wasn't some small vanity project. J.Lo had to dig deep, dropping a staggering $20 million of her own money to make it happen. Now, most stars would panic watching that many zeros vanish, but not Jennifer. She brushed it off like it was nothing. In her own words, "We went in over budget." It was a challenging project in that way. It's like there could have never been enough money for the project. We didn't have endless funds from a studio. This was a very independent project that I was self-financing, so it was very challenging. Even she admitted the whole thing nearly collapsed financially. Behind the scenes, she actually had investors lined up to put money into the project, but the financing deal crumbled at the last minute. Any other artist would have pulled the plug right then and there, but not J.Lo. She wasn't about to let her dream die in front of the world. Instead, she pulled out her own checkbook and doubled down on the gamble, knowing she might never see that money again. She even admitted that people around her thought she was completely off her rocker for making such a reckless move. "Everybody thought I was crazy when I said I would self-fund the film. We did have financing, and then that fell out," Lopez explained in one interview. But despite the whispers, the doubts, and the warnings, she charged forward anyway, risking it all for the sake of her vision. When the investors pulled out at the very last minute, Jennifer Lopez was faced with a brutal choice: scale it all the way down to just a basic music video, or go all in and risk it all. And that moment right there showed just how personal this project really was to her. This wasn't about chart numbers or climbing back into the industry race. J.Lo was putting her heart, her heartbreak, and her entire legacy out there for the world to see. And she didn't hold back. Jennifer decided to take something as raw and vulnerable as her love life and spin it into a Hollywood-sized production. By staking an eye-popping $20 million of her own cash, she was betting that the fairy tale of Bennifer could still make magic. In her eyes, this wasn't just entertainment, it was a living love story, a glittering cinematic tribute to her rekindled romance with Ben Affleck. But here's the hard truth: Jennifer Lopez might be a superstar, but she's no high roller when it comes to gambling on love. Because that glittering dream, it came crashing down fast. The public didn't bite. Why? Simple. Nobody cared about Bennifer anymore. Fans had long since moved on, scrolling past old love stories in favor of new drama and fresher faces. What Jennifer believed was raw, romantic, and authentic, her audience saw as tired, recycled, and out of touch. In the end, what she imagined would be a timeless love letter ended up looking like a desperate rerun. The very story she thought would pull crowds to the theater couldn't even get them to click play. Her vision wasn't just ignored, it was shattered into pieces. Fans weren't the only ones over it. Even Jennifer Lopez's own former publicist, Rob Shooter, didn't hold back when asked about the project. He told the Post, "Jennifer's always been a marketing and PR genius, but her biggest miscalculation here is that she thinks the world is still interested in Ben and Jennifer's love story, but no one cares about Jennifer anymore." Brutal words, but many agreed he wasn't lying. And that was just scratching the surface. While Lopez was desperately pushing her album and the glossy love story around it, the press had their eyes locked on something way juicier: rumors of trouble in paradise. Instead of glowing write-ups about her music, the headlines were plastered with speculation about her marriage falling apart. For a record that was literally marketed as a celebration of true love, the timing could not have been worse. Tabloids didn't have to dig in the shadows either. The cracks were already out in the open, and people were side-eyeing the release. Why launch a giant cinematic love letter right when the relationship behind it looked like it was on the rocks? The irony was almost painful. And here's the wildest part: Jennifer wasn't just inspired by her romance with Ben. She was actually pulling directly from him, using his private letters as creative fuel for her songs and her film. What was framed as the ultimate romantic gesture suddenly looked messy and intrusive. Imagine bearing your soul in handwritten notes, only to see them turned into chart hooks and movie dialogue. Inside is whispered that Ben Affleck was far from thrilled with the move. Sources close to him revealed he felt blindsided and uncomfortable with Jennifer sharing such personal pieces of their history. Something she thought would come across as raw and heartfelt instead had the vibe of crossing boundaries. And that tension only added more fire to the rumors swirling around their already fragile marriage. Ben Affleck himself admitted he was caught off guard by the way Jennifer used his private words. His reaction said it all. I did really find the beauty and the poetry and the irony and the fact that it's the greatest story never told. If you're making a record about it, that seems kind of like telling it. That single statement revealed just how uneasy he really felt about J.Lo putting their private love on public display. And with that, the year 2024, meant to mark Jennifer's glorious artistic comeback, spiraled into one of the roughest chapters of her career. Instead of celebrating a rebirth, the narrative became a professional flop wrapped in whispers of divorce. What should have been a career-defining moment ended up casting a shadow over everything she had worked for, but the real heartbreak hit once the project finally dropped. After months of hype from her camp, the release landed with a thud. No excitement, no standing ovations, just disappointment. Critics lined up to drag it, and they didn't hold back. The Ringer dismissed it as overproduced and uncanny, while the New York Post doubled down on the idea that the very premise that people still cared about Jennifer was doomed from the start. And it wasn't just the media piling on, fans themselves turned cold. Instead of celebrating J.Lo's vulnerability, they laughed at it. Online reactions branded the project cringe with memes, mocking her music, her movie, and the endless focus on her marriage. What Jennifer believed would be a heartfelt, love-fueled triumph turned into an uncomfortable spectacle, an expensive, overblown experiment that left her legacy more questioned than ever. The backlash didn't stop with critics. Fans piled on too, and the comments were ruthless. One person flat out said releasing a new album was a mistake to begin with. It's been 10 years since her last one, which wasn't really groundbreaking, even if I liked it myself. Almost nobody follows J.Lo for music nowadays, and the younger generations only know her as a diva, not an artist. She should have just stuck to making films with Amazon, ouch. Another review was even harsher, dragging her image and talent in one blow. The film portrays her as a horrible, horrible, selfish, and deeply narcissistic addict who can't sing. The film is bad. The album is bad. She's going to take a bath. Deserves it though. Maybe she should do some charity work for the less fortunate, and then she'll be able to put her pain and heartbreak into perspective. That's the kind of brutal criticism no superstar ever wants attached to their name. But the insults weren't the only blow commercially. Things were just as grim. Instead of storming the charts like a comeback queen, J.Lo's album limped out of the gate. This Is Me. Now debuted at number 38 on the Billboard 200, a shockingly low placement for someone of her stature. And the first week sales? Embarrassing. Some reports said 14,000 copies, others stretched it to 18,000. But either way, it was one of the weakest chart openings of her career. And as if that wasn't painful enough, the tour meant to breathe life into the album turned into a nightmare of its own. Branded as This Is Me. Now, the tour, it was supposed to be the centerpiece of her big comeback, but instead it flopped hard. Venues struggled to sell tickets, and empty arenas became impossible to hide. Show after show got canceled, and the hype faded faster than anyone expected. In a desperate move, Lopez tried to save face by rebranding the tour, scrapping the album tie-in and renaming it This Is Me Live, The Greatest Hits. It was a clear pivot, signaling that even she knew the new material wasn't enough to pack seats. What started as a passion project meant to celebrate her love and her legacy ended up forcing her to fall back on nostalgia because the present wasn't selling. By the time Jennifer Lopez rebranded her tour, most people saw it as nothing more than a desperate last-ditch effort to claw back even a fraction of that jaw-dropping $20 million she had already sunk into the project. But even flipping the script couldn't save it. Ticket sales stayed flat, arenas sat half empty, and eventually J.Lo had no choice but to pull the plug altogether. Her team tried to spin the story, of course. Publicists rushed to tell the press that she was stepping away to focus on family. But fans weren't buying it for a second. To them, the truth was obvious. The tour was tanking, and canceling it wasn't a choice, it was survival. By the time the news broke, the narrative had already been written. The project was a flop, the gamble had failed, and the tour was beyond saving. And these weren't just rumors floating online, this was the reality. The receipts were there, plain as day. Weak sales, empty seats, brutal reviews. J.Lo's vision of turning her vulnerability into a cinematic fairy tale had backfired, transforming her project into a spectacle that felt forced, self-indulgent, and painfully out of touch with today's audience. What she hoped would be intimate and inspiring ended up coming across as dated and tone-deaf. The numbers tell the story better than anything else could. An album that barely cracked the charts, a documentary that sparked more mockery than admiration, and a world tour that couldn't even stay alive. For an icon of her stature, that's more than just a disappointment. It's a reminder that in today's industry, name recognition isn't enough. Jennifer Lopez learned the hard way that fame can open doors, bankroll projects, and command attention. But there's one thing even a global superstar with decades of hits behind her can't buy: relevance. And in 2024, relevance is the one thing she needed most.